Flow, The Psychology of the Optimal Experience by Mihaly, Csikszentmihalyi. Read by Ugo Agoruah. Chapter 2, Part 2, The Limits of Consciousness. If it were possible to expand indefinitely what consciousness is able to encompass, one of the most fundamental dreams of humankind would come true. It would be almost as good as being immortal or omnipotent. In short, godlike. We could think everything, feel everything, do everything, scan through so much information that we could fill up every fraction of a second with a rich tapestry of experiences. In the space of a lifetime, we could go through 1 million, or why not, through an infinite number of lives. Unfortunately, the nervous system has a definite limit on how much information it can process at any given time. There are just so many events that can appear in consciousness and be recognized and handled appropriately before they begin to crowd each other out. Walking across a room while chewing gum at the same time is not too difficult, even though some statesmen have been alleged to be unable to do it. But in fact, there is not that much more that can be done concurrently. Thoughts have to follow each other, or they get jumbled. While we are thinking about a problem, we cannot truly experience either happiness or sadness. We cannot run, sing, and balance the checkbook simultaneously, because each one of these activities exhausts most of our capabilities for attention. At some point in our scientific knowledge, we are on the verge of being able to estimate how much information the central nervous system is capable of processing. It seems we can manage at most 7 bits of information, such as differentiated sounds or visual stimuli or recognizable nuances of emotion or thought at any one time, and that the shortest time it takes to discriminate between one set of bits and another is about 1/18th of a second. By using these figures, one concludes that it is possible to process at most 126 bits of information per second, or 7,560 per minute, or almost 500,000 per hour. Over a lifetime of 70 years, and counting 16 hours of waking time each day, this amounts to about 185 billion bits of information. It is out of this total that everything in our life must come. Every thought, memory, feeling, or action. It seems like a huge amount, but in reality, it does not go that far. The limitation of consciousness is demonstrated by the fact that to understand what another person is saying, we must process 40 bits of information per second. If we assume the upper limit of our capability to be 126 bits per second, it follows that to understand what 3 people are saying simultaneously is theoretically possible, but only by managing to keep out our consciousness every other thought or sensation. We couldn't, for instance, be aware of the speaker's expressions, nor could we wonder why they are saying what they are saying or notice what they are wearing. Of course, these figures are only suggestive at this point in our knowledge of the way the mind works. It could be argued justifiably that they either underestimate or overestimate the capability of the mind to process information. The optimists claim that through the course of evolution, the nervous system has become adept at chunking bits of information so that processing capacity is constantly expanded. Simple functions like adding a column of numbers or driving a car grow to be automated, leaving the mind free to deal with more data. We also learn how to compress and streamline information through symbolic means. Language, math, abstract concepts, and stylized narratives. Each biblical parable, for instance, tries to encode the hard-won experience of many individuals over unknown eons of time. Consciousness, the optimists argue, is an open system. In effect, it is indefinitely expandable. and there is no need to take its limitations into account. But the ability to compress stimuli does not help as much as one might expect. The requirements of life still dictate that we spend about 8% of waking time eating, and almost the same amount taking care of personal bodily needs, such as washing, dressing, shaving, and going to the bathroom. These activities alone take up about 15% of consciousness, and while engaged in them, we cannot do much else that requires serious concentration. But even when there is nothing else pressing occupying their minds, most people fall far below the peak capacity for processing information. In the roughly 1/3 of the day that is free of obligations, in their precious leisure time, most people in fact seem to use their minds as little as possible. The largest part of free time, almost half of it for American adults, is spent in front of the television set. The plots and the characters of the popular shows are so repetitive that although watching TV requires the processing of visual images, very little else in the way of memory, thinking, or volition is required. Not surprisingly, people report some of the lowest levels of concentration, use of skill, clarity of thought, and feelings of potency when watching television. The other leisure activities people usually do at home are only a little more demanding. Reading most newspapers and magazines, talking to other people, and gazing out the window also involve processing very little new information, and thus require little concentration. So the 185 billion events to be enjoyed over our mortal days might be either an overestimate or an underestimate. If we consider the amount of data the brain could theoretically process, the number might be too low. But if we look at how people actually use their minds, it is definitely much too high. In any case, an individual can experience only so much. Therefore, the information we allow into consciousness becomes extremely important. It is, in fact, what determines the content and the quality of life.